Here's a question I'd love to hear from Jimmy and from Stephen about, nowadays you can have a deliverable today. Your movie's going to go on into theaters mostly at 2K, maybe some places at 4K, maybe some places in IMAX, and then it's going to go on streaming and it's going to be all these different definitions on streaming up to and including Ultra HD 4K. And there are new formats coming out all the time that we can't anticipate, although if you hang out in SEMPTI enough, you can get some idea what they are. How do you future-proof your material while still keeping budget under control? How do you Mark mentioned this idea that you could end up with very large file sizes that aren't appropriate for the project, but they might be appropriate for a deliverable you need down the road. How do you balance that?
Well, I think we're kind of known for pushing the 4K agenda, right? And that is part of our requirement because of future-proofing the content. And we always try to do it with the creative imperative in mind as well. But I think it means working in let me put it this way. For nearly a century, we almost accidentally, by shooting film, created a great archive that we could go back to over and over and over again. And then we started shooting in video directly to the color space that we were going to display on the television. And then we stepped back and starting to record in log formats again that emulated the range of film. But our practices have been slow to shift back towards favoring creating a master that we can use over and over again. I think that's whereas color science for many years in the film world was about making sure that what you did in the DI room and with the colorist was reflected in the theater, I think now a lot of the work that we do with color scientists is more about creating a pipeline that preserves all the range of the photography, of the color correction that was committed, so that when there is a new format like HDR or Rec 2020, wider colors that we've never seen before on television, the project can live in that space as well. And sure, I think that right now it means kind of going back to earlier practices that we had when we were shooting film. It's almost counterintuitive, I think, for some, whether it's in post-production or in production, to think about it that way again, because, again, it was so accidental for 100 years that we ended up with this great archival format called film.
So I'm going to shake that up a little bit because as a producer, I think the best thing you can do to future-proof your work is to create great content, quite honestly. If you create something that people really, really want to see, they'll find a way to adapt it to new technologies, really just like what happened with film before.
I'd like to add something to that, too, and it hits an earlier question. I mean, when I talk with producers about honestly how they should prioritize their budgets, I'm with you. I'm with making decisions first and foremost that are going to show up on the screen. And when you're considering whether to shoot 4K or 6K or 8K, but you have a limited number of shoot days, I'm for more shoot days, record in a more efficient codec if that's going to help you save some money that you can put on the screen.
I don't think they're incompatible, though. I think there's
when I'm saying actually complements what you're saying, quite honestly.
I don't think they're incompatible. I think that's what's so interesting about working right now with all the camera development that's happening. I think there are compressed codecs that are incredibly efficient and look really great, and that I completely agree that the first and foremost part of the workflow should be do no harm. It's like the Hippocratic Oath. It's you don't want to put a technical imperative that's going to basically bind the creatives. But that means taking not only the shorthand view of being able to make your days every day, but also the longhand view of, I think, of what opportunities are there going to be to let people see this material for as long as possible.
When you say do no harm, what kind of harm can you do exactly? What are the things that the people in this room should be looking out for when they make those decisions?
I think when you create a workflow that's overcomplicated and that puts a lot of responsibility on on certain areas of the production, whether it's for media backup or very complex color workflow and pipeline that is very hard for other people to understand and all the vendors to connect on. I think these are areas where you're creating risk, basically, of people making mistakes, or maybe it just takes too long to empty the cards at the end of the day, and you're not sure you're going to get all the cards you need back in the morning. Those are the areas where I'm saying the workflow needs to do no harm. It needs to support the production, not create hurdles for it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that part of it is to not paint yourself into a corner. I mean, people think, oh, I got to shoot raw. If I shoot raw, then it means it's the absolute, unaffected by anything kind of. Well, the fact is that you're gonna do something with that footage. You got to be able to see it. Otherwise it looks like the Matrix. It has to look like something. So on set, you need to be able to see what this looks like. What it means to turn into a piece of video, and then a DIT or someone is going to do something, even if just to put a standard like Rex look, anything. You're gonna be looking at it. So that's fine. That's great. That's important, because then it's something that the director makes choices on, the DP makes choices on, but those choices, that information, whether you're shooting in RAW or shooting in a video format, and in our Vericams we can shoot in a whole variety of different ways. You can generate proxies and stuff. What you want to do is make sure that information, that intent, makes its way to post and gets preserved for later work. If you somewhere down the line someone wants to make a change, but at the same time you keep the integrity of the original material, whether that means you're shooting in RAW or you're shooting in a log format, you're shooting in 4K 444, or whatever it might be. You can take that raw data or high-end video, very little compression kind of information, and you can take the creative choices that you were trying to make on the day, on set, and that information can make it to post cleanly without being stamped and, as they say, baked into the material. Because you still want to have room to play with. You need to, when you see these two shots together, oh, well, that one's a little bit dark compared to this one. It's a little more green, whatever. You need to be able to have room to play with it, but also you need to have room to play, 10 years from now when someone wants to repurpose this material to now show it on whatever the thing that's going to beam into your brain. Who knows? We don't know what's coming next, but you want to be able to go back to the original, like going back to a camera negative and being able to make the original, creative choices, not only having the material being in this unexpurgated form, but also having a way to keep track of what were the thoughts at the time, the creative thoughts as they were happening on set, and then in a color correction process. That's a guide. You want to be able to retain that information. Now we have workflows that are available that, whether it's built into the camera where we can take color systems, and there are DITs, ColorFront and other systems that can go plug directly into the camera, and you can be creating proxies so that you can have a version that's recorded at the same time as your original master that's in log or in raw. You can also record something that capture the planned color corrected version, and also what those color correction settings are. All that information can be recorded at the time by using the camera, or you can have that information in post systems and you can have that go along the way. Whatever it is, you want to be keeping track of that information, because that's going to protect not only your creative decisions now, but also your creative decisions in the future.
Yeah, actually, and this is really coming into play, and I think we all owe Netflix a thank you for emphasizing archiving. That's a simple word, but probably more than anything else will affect your ability in the future to remaster your material. We don't have film negative like we used to in film separations, but if you've archived your projects kind of every step of the way, you've saved those log dailies. And one thing I thought I'd mention, that I'm sure a lot of people understand the difference between raw and log. They're not the same thing, and some producers get confused. You can shoot with a log color profile even if you're not recording raw. Meaning that you can use a compressed codec, but capture with a log profile, which is going to give you that extended range when we get into the color correction step. But what I wanted to mention is, so if you can archive your dailies in a log format, you've got your original material in a way that you can go back to it and do pretty much anything you want to do with it in the future. You want to archive your offline project, your online project, your color project, and these are things that weren't routinely being done, in earlier times. You had your finished master, but you didn't necessarily have all the information and all of the projects that you used to create that master. And Netflix has been leading the way in insisting that all of those pieces be saved, be archived. And I'm in the middle of a remastering project right now for a very big, well-known project, and they unfortunately didn't have all those incremental things saved, and it's adding time and expense. It would have been much easier, and it will be easier for the seasons where we do have all that material archived.